The rain came down in sheets, turning the Manhattan streets into rivers of neon and shadow. Grace Sanchez pressed her daughters closer to her chest, trying to shield them from the downpour with nothing but her soaked cardigan and sheer desperation. Eva whimpered against her right shoulder. Ava had gone silent an hour ago, which terrified Grace more than crying ever could. 2 years old. Her babies were only 2 years old, and she was failing them. Her arms burned with the effort of carrying both girls. 38 pounds combined, plus the diaper bag that kept sliding down her shoulder, threatening to spill its meager contents onto the wet pavement. Grace's vision blurred at the edges, not from rain, but from exhaustion so profound it had become a physical presence, weighing her down with every step. 3 days. That's how long it had been since she'd slept more than 20 minutes at a time. 4 days since she'd eaten anything substantial. The protein bar she'd split between the twins that morning had been the last of their food. Her stomach had stopped growling yesterday, replaced by a hollow ache that made her dizzy. The address was somewhere on this block. She'd memorized it from the crumpled business card she'd found in her mother's things after the funeral. Lloyd Hernandez, private security consultant. The card had listed this address in elegant script, along with a phone number Grace had tried calling 17 times. It always went straight to voicemail. Her mother had never mentioned Lloyd Hernandez, never talked about knowing anyone in New York, let alone someone wealthy enough to have a business card printed on actual linen paper. But in those final days, delirious with fever, Maria Sanchez had whispered one thing over and over. If something happens to me, find Lloyd. He'll keep you safe. Tell him about the ring. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Grace looked down at her left hand, at the wedding band that had appeared on her mother's nightstand 3 weeks before she died. Simple platinum, engraved with initials she didn't recognize, and a date from 26 years ago. Her mother had pressed it into Grace's palm with shaking fingers. "Wear it," she'd said. "When you find Lloyd, he'll understand." Except Grace didn't understand. Didn't understand why her mother had a wedding ring hidden away. Didn't understand who Lloyd Hernandez was or why he'd supposedly helped them. Didn't understand anything except that she was out of options, out of money, and out of time. The building appeared through the rain like something from another world. Limestone facade, brass fixtures, a doorman visible through glass doors that probably cost more than Grace had earned in her entire life. This couldn't be right. Security consultants didn't live in buildings like this. This was old money, serious money, the kind of wealth that came with power and influence. Grace's steps faltered. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe her mother had been confused, the fever talking, mixing up memories with hallucinations. Maybe Grace should turn around, find a shelter, figure out something else. Ava coughed, a wet, rattling sound that seized Grace's heart in a fist of ice. The baby had been fighting a cold for a week. Without proper medicine, without consistent food, without warmth, it was getting worse. Grace could feel the heat radiating from her daughter's small body even through their soaked clothes. No more maybes, no more options. Grace climbed the steps to the entrance. The doorman looked up, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to barely concealed alarm as he took in her appearance. Soaked through, shivering, clutching 2 small children like they were the only solid things in a dissolving world. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to." "Lloyd Hernandez." Grace's voice came out hoarse. "I need to see Lloyd Hernandez. Please, it's an emergency." The doorman's hand moved to his phone. "Mr. Hernandez doesn't accept unannounced visitors. If you'd like to leave a message." "Please." The word broke on a sob Grace couldn't control. "Please. My daughters are sick. I just need 5 minutes. Just tell him Maria Sanchez's daughter is here. Tell him about the ring." Something flickered across the doorman's face. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. He studied her more carefully, his gaze dropping to her left hand where the platinum band caught the light. "Wait here." He disappeared inside, leaving Grace standing in the rain. She counted her heartbeats, tried to stay upright. Eva was crying again, soft and pitiful against her neck. Ava's breathing had developed a wheeze that made Grace want to scream. The doorman returned with another man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit despite the late hour. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen violence and hadn't flinched. His eyes swept over Grace with professional assessment before settling on the ring. "Penthouse," he said curtly to the doorman, then to Grace. "Come with me." Grace followed him into a lobby that belonged in a palace. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art on the walls that was probably worth more than most houses. Her wet sneakers squeaked with every step, leaving puddles she couldn't avoid creating. The elevator was paneled in dark wood and brass. The man security, she realized. Definitely security pressed the button for the top floor. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just watched her with that same careful assessment, his attention occasionally dropping to the twins. They need a doctor, Grace heard herself say. Ava has a fever. I can't afford. Mr. Hernandez will handle it. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it made fresh anxiety spike through Grace's exhaustion. What kind of man had resources on standby for medical emergencies? What kind of security consultant had this level of wealth and power? The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment. Not a hallway with multiple doors, but one massive space that took up the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. The city spread out like a carpet of lights. The furnishings were masculine and elegant leather, dark wood, art that was probably original. And standing by the windows, phone to his ear, was a man who made Grace's breath catch despite everything. Lloyd Hernandez was tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his white dress shirt perfectly. His suit jacket was discarded over a nearby chair. Sleeves rolled to his elbows revealed forearms marked with ink tattoos that suggested a past very different from this refined present. His hair was dark, styled back but with a few strands falling forward, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, and eyes so dark they appeared black even from across the room. He turned when the elevator opened, still speaking rapid Spanish into his phone. His gaze landed on Grace, swept over her soaked appearance, then fixed on the twins in her arms. His entire body went rigid. Whatever he'd been saying cut off mid-sentence. The phone lowered slowly from his ear. For 3 heartbeats, he just stared, his expression shifting through emotions too quick for Grace to name shock, recognition, something that looked almost like fear. Then his eyes dropped to her left hand. The wedding ring. Lloyd's face transformed. All the color drained from his features, leaving him looking carved from stone. The phone slipped from his fingers, hitting the expensive rug without a sound. Dios mío, he whispered. Grace tried to speak, to explain, to ask for help, but the world tilted violently. The edges of her vision went black, her knees buckled. She was falling, the twins still clutched to her chest, and all she could think was that she'd failed them. Failed to keep them safe. Failed to... Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. One arm swept under her knees, the other behind her back, supporting her weight effortlessly while somehow not crushing the babies between them. Grace's head lolled against a solid chest. She smelled expensive cologne and something warmer, more essential, cedar and smoke. I've got you. The voice was deep, accented, tight with something Grace couldn't identify through the fog in her head. I've got all of you. You're safe now. Grace forced her eyes open. Lloyd's face filled her vision, those dark eyes boring into hers with an intensity that should have been frightening. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. The twins, Grace managed. Please, they need... Carlos. Lloyd's voice cut across the room like a blade. The security guard who'd brought her up appeared immediately. Get Dr. Rivera here now. I don't care what he's doing. I don't care if he's in surgery. Tell him it's an emergency. Life or death. Yes, sir. And get Maria up here. I need women's clothes, children's clothes, towels, blankets, everything. Move. Lloyd carried Grace deeper into the penthouse, his strides long and purposeful. She should tell him to put her down, that she could walk, but the truth was she couldn't. Her body had hit some kind of limit and simply stopped obeying commands. He brought her to a large bedroom, all soft grays and cream colors. The bed looked like something from a hotel, massive and covered in what had to be Egyptian cotton. Lloyd laid her down carefully, his hands gentle despite their obvious strength. The babies. Grace tried again. Her arms were still locked around Eva and Ava, unable to let go even though they needed space, needed warmth, needed... Let me take them. Lloyd's hands covered hers, warm and steady. I promise I won't hurt them. I just need to get them dry and warm. Let me help, Grace. Her name in his mouth shocked her. How do you... Your mother. His voice roughened. You look just like her. Same eyes, same face. I'd know Maria Sanchez's daughter anywhere. The grief that crashed through Grace was physical, a wave that left her gasping. Lloyd saw it, something softening in those hard features. He waited, patient despite the obvious urgency, until Grace's arms slowly loosened. He lifted Eva first, the toddler whimpering as she was separated from her mother. "Shh, pequeña," he murmured, his voice transforming into something soft and soothing. "You're safe. I'm going to take care of you and your sister and your mama. I promise." A woman appeared in the doorway. Maria, older with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. She took Eva from Lloyd with practiced ease, already assessing the child with the efficiency of someone who'd raised children of her own. "Fever," she said immediately, "but not dangerously high. We'll get her warm and comfortable." Lloyd lifted Eva next. The smaller twin barely stirred, her breathing still worryingly shallow. Lloyd's expression darkened as he passed her to another woman who'd appeared behind Maria. "The doctor?" he asked, without looking away from Eva's pale face. 10 minutes, Carlos called from somewhere beyond the room. Lloyd turned back to Grace. She was shivering violently now, the adrenaline that had kept her moving finally deserting her. He crouched beside the bed, eye level with her. "When did you last eat?" Grace tried to remember. "Thursday, maybe. Or Wednesday. I gave the girls the last of the food this morning." His jaw clenched again. "And sleep?" I can't remember." Lloyd stood abruptly and left the room. Grace heard him giving orders in that same commanding tone, words too quick and quiet for her to catch. He returned carrying a glass of water and what looked like a protein shake. "Drink this." He helped her sit up, one hand supporting her back. Slowly. "Your stomach won't handle much right now." The water was cold and perfect. Grace wanted to gulp it down but forced herself to take small sips as Lloyd instructed. The protein shake tasted like chocolate and felt like salvation sliding down her throat. "Not too much," Lloyd said after she'd managed half of it. "We'll get real food in you once the doctor clears it. The twins, I need to see them. They're being taken care of, getting bathed and changed into warm, dry clothes. Maria and Teresa have 8 children between them. Your daughters are in the best hands." He paused. "Except yours." Grace's eyes burned with tears she couldn't afford to shed. "I don't know who you are. I don't know why my mother had that ring or why she told me to find you. I don't know anything except that I was out of options and you were the only name she gave me before." Her voice broke. Lloyd's hand found hers, his grip careful but solid. "Your mother saved my life 26 years ago." His voice was quiet, carrying a weight of old grief. "I owed her everything, and now I owe you and those babies the same protection she gave me." His eyes dropped to the ring on her finger. "That ring is mine. I gave it to Maria when I was 19 years old, and stupid enough to think a piece of metal meant forever." Grace stared at him. "You were married to my mother?" "For about 6 months." A sad smile touched his lips. "We were kids. I was trying to escape my father's world. She was trying to escape poverty. We thought love was enough to save us from our circumstances." He paused. "We were wrong. But we parted as friends. She kept the ring when she left New York. I never thought I'd see it again. She never told me." Grace's throat was tight. "She never said anything about you, about New York, about any of this." Maria was good at protecting people by keeping them separate from her past. "She knew what I became after she left, knew the life I chose wasn't compatible with motherhood or safety." Lloyd's expression hardened. "What happened to her, Grace? What brought you to my door with her ring and 2 babies who look half-starved?" The whole story spilled out. Her mother's cancer diagnosis 6 months ago, the medical bills that had drained their savings, Grace's job at the elementary school that barely covered rent, the eviction notice. Her mother's death 3 weeks ago, the funeral Grace had paid for with a credit card she couldn't afford, the shelter that had turned them away because they were over capacity, the desperate search through her mother's belongings that had yielded nothing but that business card and the ring. Lloyd listened without interrupting, his face growing progressively darker. When Grace finished, his hand was gripping hers so tightly it almost hurt. "You've been on the streets for 3 weeks with 2 babies. Only at night. During the day, I'd take them to the public library. Free bathrooms, water fountains. I could let them play in the children's section while I applied for jobs online." Grace's voice was flat, reciting facts. "But the library's close at 6. After that, it was just finding places to sleep that were safe enough." "Safe enough." Lloyd repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "There is no safe enough when you're homeless with children." A knock at the door interrupted them. A man in his 50s entered, carrying a leather medical bag. He had the calm competence of someone who'd seen everything and never panicked. "Dr. Rivera," Lloyd said. "Thank you for coming. You said life or death." The doctor's eyes found Grace. "I see you weren't exaggerating. What followed was thorough and professional. Dr. Rivera examined Grace with gentle efficiency, taking vitals, asking questions about symptoms, checking for signs of malnutrition and dehydration. His expression remained neutral until he finished. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, exhaustion. He looked at Lloyd. She needs fluids, rest, and food in that order. I can start an IV here if you want to avoid the hospital. Do it. Grace tried to protest. IVs were expensive. She couldn't afford, but Lloyd silenced her with a look. Money is not your concern. Your only job right now is to let people help you. The IV went in smoothly. Cool liquid began flowing into Grace's veins, and the relief was immediate. Her head cleared slightly. The desperate thirst that had been her constant companion began to recede. Dr. Rivera moved to examine the twins next. Grace tried to get up, to follow, but Lloyd's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Stay. The IV needs to finish. Maria will bring them to you once he's done examining them. I need to be there. They need you healthy. Lloyd's voice was firm but not unkind. Which means you need to rest. Trust that they're safe. Can you do that? Grace wanted to say no. Wanted to argue that she'd been the only person keeping her daughters alive for weeks and she couldn't just hand that responsibility to strangers. But the truth was she was so tired, so incredibly, bone-deep tired, that the idea of trusting someone else, just for a moment, felt like oxygen after drowning. Okay, she whispered. Lloyd nodded once and left to check on the twins. Grace lay back against pillows that felt like clouds, the IV dripping steadily, and let her eyes close just for a second. When she opened them again, the room was darker. Night had fully fallen. The IV was gone from her arm, replaced by a small bandage. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read, was Lloyd Hernandez. The twins? Grace sat up too quickly, the room spinning. They're fine. Dr. Rivera examined them thoroughly. Ava has a respiratory infection that needs antibiotics, which he prescribed. Eva's healthy, just hungry and tired. Both of them are sleeping in the room next door with Maria watching over them. Lloyd leaned forward. They're safe, Grace. I give you my word. I don't even know you. No. But your mother did. And she trusted me enough to send you here wearing that ring. His eyes dropped to her left hand again. She knew what that would mean to me. Knew I'd see it and understand that you were under my protection now. I can't just move in here with my children and expect you to take care of us. I'm not asking for that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Lloyd stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Your mother gave me a future when I had nothing. She saw a violent, angry kid who was destroying himself and convinced me I could be more, could choose differently than my father had. He turned back to face her. Without Maria, I'd be dead or in prison. Probably both. I owe her a debt I can never repay. The least I can do is make sure her daughter and granddaughters have what they need. Granddaughters? Grace's voice cracked. She never met them. She died before I could bring them to visit from Arizona. Pain flickered across Lloyd's features. Then I'll honor her memory by being the family she would have been to them. The offer was too much. Too generous from a man who was essentially a stranger. Grace knew she should refuse, should maintain her independence, should find another way. Except there was no other way. She'd exhausted every option before coming here. Just for a little while, she heard herself say. Until I can find work and save enough for our own place, I'll pay you back. Every cent. We'll discuss terms later. Lloyd moved toward the door. Right now, you need to eat and rest. Maria prepared soup. I'll bring it. He left before Grace could argue. She looked around the guest room, easily twice the size of the studio apartment she'd lost. Expensive furniture, soft lighting, windows that overlooked a city she'd never been able to afford. This was temporary. It had to be temporary. But as Lloyd returned, carrying a tray with soup and fresh bread, as the smell hit her and her stomach cramped with desperate hunger, Grace allowed herself one moment of pure relief. They were safe. For tonight at least, her daughters were warm and fed and safe. Tomorrow she'd figure out the rest. Grace woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of children's laughter. For 3 disorienting seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the rain. Lloyd Hernandez, collapsing at his doorstep with the twins. She shot upright in bed, heart hammering. The twins. Where were? The bedroom door opened. Maria, the older woman from last night, entered carrying a tray with coffee and what looked like fresh fruit and toast. She smiled when she saw Grace awake. Buenos dias. Your daughters are having breakfast in the kitchen. They're perfectly safe, I promise. She set the tray on the nightstand. Mr. Hernandez asked me to bring you food and tell you to take your time. The girls are entertained. I need to see them. Grace started to get out of bed, then realized she was wearing pajamas she didn't recognize. Soft cotton pants and a matching top that fit perfectly. I changed you last night after you fell asleep. I hope that's all right. Your clothes needed washing. Maria gestured to a closet. Mr. Hernandez had some things delivered early this morning. For you and the twins. Just basics until you can shop properly. Grace opened the closet to find it stocked with jeans, sweaters, undergarments, all in what looked like her size. The efficiency of it should have been comforting. Instead, it made her acutely aware of how much power Lloyd Hernandez wielded. He'd made a phone call and an entire wardrobe had appeared before dawn. Eat first, Maria encouraged gently. The twins are with Teresa and Mr. Hernandez. They're safe and happy. The food was simple but perfect. Fresh strawberries, buttered toast, scrambled eggs that were still warm. Grace ate slowly, her stomach protesting the sudden abundance after weeks of scarcity. The coffee was strong and exactly what she needed. After showering in a bathroom that was larger than her entire previous apartment, Grace dressed in jeans and a soft gray sweater from the closet. Everything fit perfectly, which raised questions about how Lloyd had known her size. The business card her mother had left was vague about his actual profession, but the more Grace saw, the more she suspected private security consultant was a generous interpretation. She followed voices to find a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. All marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. And sitting at a breakfast bar, flanked by Teresa and Maria, were Eva and Ava. Her daughters looked transformed. Clean, wearing matching pink dresses Grace had never seen before, their dark curls brushed and shining. Eva was eating pancakes with intense concentration. Ava was drinking juice from a sippy cup, her breathing clear and easy in a way it hadn't been in days. "Mama!" Eva spotted her first and launched herself from the stool. Grace caught her, pulling both twins into a hug that made her eyes burn. "Hi, babies. Are you okay? Did you sleep well?" "We slept in a big bed," Eva announced proudly. "And there was a rhinoceros," Teresa clarified with a smile. "There's a stuffed animal collection in the guest room. They picked their favorites." Grace looked up to find Lloyd standing in the doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was holding a phone but watching the reunion with an expression that made something in Grace's chest tighten. "They've been asking for you," he said quietly. "But we convinced them to let you sleep. You were out for almost 12 hours. 12 hours. Grace couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours straight. The guilt hit immediately she'd abandoned her daughters with strangers while she slept. "They were perfectly cared for," Lloyd said, reading her expression with unsettling accuracy. "Dr. Rivera came back this morning to check on Ava. The antibiotics are working. Her fever's down and her breathing is clear. Thank you." The words felt inadequate. "For everything. For last night. For the doctor. For the clothes. We need to talk." Lloyd's tone was gentle but firm. "After breakfast. There are things we need to discuss about your situation." 30 minutes later, the twins were settled in what apparently was a playroom, an entire room dedicated to children's entertainment, complete with toys that looked expensive and educational. Teresa sat with them, building towers with blocks while Eva and Ava shrieked with delight each time one fell. Lloyd led Grace to his office, a masculine space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows overlooking Central Park. He gestured to a leather chair before settling behind his desk. First, the immediate concerns. He pulled up something on his computer. "Dr. Rivera wants to see the twins again in a week. I've scheduled appointments. He'll also see you don't argue, Grace. You were severely malnourished. That requires follow-up." Grace bit back her protest about costs. "Okay. Second, living arrangements. You and the twins will stay here. I have plenty of space, and it's secure. There's a guest suite on the 3rd floor with 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a private bathroom. It'll give you privacy while keeping you under my roof." "Lloyd, I can't just move in indefinitely." "You can and you will, at least until you're back on your feet." He leaned forward. "Grace, you came to me because your mother trusted me. Honor that trust by accepting help. You're not a burden. You're family by extension of Maria." The word family hit her unexpectedly hard. Grace had been alone for so long, just her and the twins against the world. The idea of someone claiming familial obligation to them felt foreign and dangerous and desperately needed all at once. "What about work?" she managed. I need to find a job. I can't just live off your charity. Actually, I have a proposal about that. Lloyd pulled out a folder. You worked at an elementary school in Arizona. Teacher's aide, correct? Yes. How did you? I looked into your background. Standard security protocol. He said it matter-of-factly, like investigating people was normal. I own several legitimate businesses. One of them is a chain of private preschools throughout Manhattan. We're always looking for qualified staff. I can offer you a position starting next week if you're interested. Grace stared at him. You own preschools, among other things, real estate, import businesses, security consulting. I've diversified over the years. He slid the folder across the desk. The salary is competitive, full benefits including health insurance for you and the twins. The main location is 10 blocks from here, so commute is minimal, and they have on-site childcare for staff, so Eva and Ava could be with you during work hours. It was too perfect, too convenient. Grace's instincts, honed by weeks of survival, screamed that nothing came this easily without strings attached. What's the catch? Lloyd's expression didn't change. No catch. You need work. I have work available. You're qualified, and the position needs filling. It's a practical solution. And if I say no, if I want to find my own job, then you find your own job. He leaned back. I'm offering options, Grace, not demands. You're free to make whatever choice serves you and your daughters best. The reasonableness of it somehow made it worse. Grace was used to fighting, to arguing for scraps, to men who demanded compliance. Lloyd's calm flexibility unsettled her more than aggression would have. I'll think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. Lloyd stood. In the meantime, there's something else we need to address. Carlos ran a background check on you again. Standard protocol. He found something concerning. Ice flooded Grace's veins. What kind of something? Your landlord in Arizona filed a complaint claiming you damaged the apartment and skipped out on rent. There's a warrant for your arrest in Phoenix. That's not I didn't damage anything. Grace shot to her feet. I left because I couldn't pay rent after my mother died and medical bills destroyed my savings. I tried to explain, tried to work something out, but he said if I couldn't pay immediately, I had to leave. I left the keys and everything exactly as I found it. I believe you. Lloyd's voice was calm. But the warrant is real, which means if the wrong person runs your information, you could be arrested and the twins could be placed in state custody while it's sorted out. The room spun. Grace grabbed the edge of the desk for support. No, they can't take my daughters. I'll go back. I'll pay whatever he says I owe. You're not going anywhere. Lloyd moved around the desk. I'm going to handle this. I have lawyers who specialize in this kind of situation. They'll negotiate with your landlord, settle whatever he claims you owe, and get the warrant dismissed. It'll take maybe a week. I can't afford lawyers. I can, and I'm choosing to spend my money this way. He guided her back to the chair. Grace, listen to me. You came here with nothing, running from circumstances that weren't your fault. Let me help. Let me use the resources I have to fix things that are fixable. Why? The question burst out. Why are you doing all this? I know you said you owed my mother. But this is more than repaying a debt. This is changing my entire life. Lloyd was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain. 26 years ago, I was 19 and running from my father's organization. He is a violent man who built an empire on fear and blood. I wanted no part of it. Your mother found me half dead in an alley, beaten by my father's men for trying to leave. She took me to a clinic, paid for treatment with money she didn't have, and let me stay in her apartment while I healed. He walked to the window, staring out at the city. She was barely making ends meet herself. Single mother trying to finish nursing school while working 2 jobs. But she shared what little she had. Told me I could choose who I became, that I wasn't doomed to repeat my father's path. His jaw tightened. We got married thinking it would give me legal protection, a new identity separate from my family name. It didn't work. My father found me anyway. Maria left New York to keep herself safe. I stayed, and eventually built my own organization. Your own organization, Grace repeated slowly. Doing what exactly? Lloyd turned to face her. I provide security services, protection for people who need it. Some of my work operates in gray areas that law enforcement doesn't cover. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything I do is legal. But I'm also not my father. I have rules, lines I don't cross. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I'm a man who operates outside conventional boundaries when necessary, to protect people who have no other options. His dark eyes held hers steadily. Your mother knew what I became. She didn't approve of all of it, but she never cut ties completely. Kept that ring as a reminder that I owed her. Kept my business card because she knew if things ever got desperate, I'd honor our connection. Grace should have been terrified. Should have grabbed her daughters and run. But she'd spent weeks on the streets, seen the worst of humanity, learned that danger came in many forms. Lloyd Hernandez might operate outside the law, but he'd shown her more genuine kindness in 12 hours than most legal citizens had in months. I need you to promise me something, she said finally. What? That your business, whatever it really is, won't touch my daughters. That they'll never be in danger because of your connections or enemies or whatever complications come with your life. You have my word. Lloyd didn't hesitate. They'll never even know about that side of my work. To them, I'm just the man who owns preschools and helps their mother. I keep my worlds separate, Grace. Always have. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Grace stood. Then I'll accept your help. The job, the housing, the legal assistance, all of it. But I'm paying you back. I don't know how long it'll take, but I'm keeping track of every dollar you spend on us, and eventually, I'm repaying it. Something that might have been respect flickered in Lloyd's expression. If that's what you need to accept help, then fine. Keep track. We'll settle accounts when you're ready. They shook hands, and Grace felt the shift between them. This was a deal now, a transaction with terms. It felt safer than charity, more balanced than rescue. The next week passed in a blur of settling in. The third-floor suite Lloyd had mentioned was actually a self-contained apartment within his penthouse. 2 bedrooms, one for Grace, one for the twins, connected by a living area with a small kitchenette. The space was decorated in soft blues and creams, child-proofed but sophisticated. Maria helped Grace organize clothing and supplies, all of which appeared with the same mysterious efficiency as the first wardrobe. The twins adapted with the resilience of children, treating the penthouse like an adventure. They loved the playroom, loved Maria and Teresa, who doted on them, loved the massive windows that let them watch the city below. Dr. Rivera came 3 times that first week. Ava's infection cleared completely. Eva, who'd been quieter than her sister, started talking more, her personality emerging now that she wasn't consumed by hunger and fear. Grace herself gained 5 pounds, the hollows under her eyes filling in as proper sleep and regular meals worked their magic. Lloyd maintained careful distance. He was present but not intrusive, eating breakfast with them most mornings before disappearing to his office or leaving for meetings. He asked about Grace's day but never pried, played with the twins when invited but never assumed access. The respect for boundaries made Grace relax incrementally. On Friday evening, Lloyd knocked on Grace's suite door carrying a stack of papers. The lawyers settled with your landlord, he said without preamble. Paid him what he claimed you owed, plus damages for the hassle. The warrant's been withdrawn. You're clear. Relief made Grace's knees weak. How much did it cost? $12,000. Grace's stomach dropped. 12,000. He was inflating damages. But the lawyers decided it was faster to pay than fight. Consider it an investment in your peace of mind. Lloyd handed her the paperwork. You're free to travel without worrying about being arrested. Fresh start. $12,000 added to everything else he'd spent. The medical bills, the clothes, the food, housing them for a week. Grace was drowning in debt to a man she barely knew, and the weight of it pressed against her chest. I'll pay you back, she said for the 100th time. I know. Lloyd's expression softened slightly. You've made that very clear. For now, focus on starting work Monday. The preschool director is expecting you. Maria can watch the twins this weekend if you want to rest or explore the city. I want to take them to a park. Let them play somewhere that isn't inside. Grace hesitated. Is that safe? You said you keep your business separate, but does that mean people might... Carlos will go with you. Lloyd pulled out his phone and typed something. He's excellent with children and trained in protection. You'll be safe. The fact that she needed protection at all should have worried Grace more. Instead, she found herself grateful for the foresight. Lloyd thought about angles she hadn't considered, anticipated needs before she voiced them. It was either incredibly controlling or incredibly caring, and she hadn't decided which yet. Saturday afternoon, Grace took the twins to Central Park with Carlos shadowing them at a respectful distance. Ava and Ava ran wild in the playground, shrieking with joy as they climbed and slid and explored. Other mothers smiled at them, made small talk about the unusually warm November weather. Grace responded on autopilot, watching her daughters play with a throat tight from gratitude. 2 weeks ago, they'd had nothing. Now her babies were healthy, happy, wearing warm coats and good shoes, playing without a care in the world. Whatever Lloyd Hernandez was, criminal or hero or something in between, he'd given them this moment of normal childhood joy. Miss Sanchez. Carlos appeared at her elbow. We should move. Grace followed his gaze. A black SUV had pulled up to the curb, windows tinted too dark to see inside. It sat there idling, not moving, not leaving. Get the twins, Carlos said quietly. Stay calm. Walk with me to our car. Fear spiked through Grace's calm. She gathered Eva and Ava, ignoring their protests about leaving. Carlos positioned himself between them and the SUV, one hand inside his jacket where Grace suspected he kept a weapon. They made it to Carlos's car without incident. The SUV pulled away once they were safely inside. What was that? Grace demanded once they were moving. Could be nothing. Could be someone checking to see if Lloyd has new assets worth knowing about. Carlos's eyes never stopped scanning the street. I'll report it. He'll increase security. Assets. Grace's voice was flat. You mean me and the twins? I mean anyone under Mr. Hernandez's protection becomes a point of interest to his competitors. Carlos glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Don't worry. Lloyd's very good at keeping people safe. You're probably the most protected single mother in Manhattan right now. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made Grace acutely aware that accepting Lloyd's help had pulled her and her daughters into a world with rules she didn't understand and dangers she couldn't predict. When they got back to the penthouse, Lloyd was waiting in the living room. Carlos gave a brief report about the SUV. Lloyd's expression didn't change, but Grace saw the tension in his shoulders. From now on, when you leave the building, you take 2 security personnel minimum, Lloyd said after Carlos left. Non-negotiable. Lloyd, I can't live like that. I can't have armed guards following me to work, to the grocery store. You can and you will. His voice was firm. Someone took interest in you today. That means they now know you matter to me, which makes you a target. This is insane. I came here for help, not to be pulled into some kind of... Grace gestured helplessly. Whatever this is, gang war, mafia politics, this is my world, Grace. I warned you it was complicated. Lloyd stood. I will not apologize for taking precautions to keep you safe. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but the security stays. They stood there, locked in a battle of wills. Grace wanted to argue, to assert her independence, to refuse to live under guard like some kind of prisoner, but she looked at Eva and Ava playing with blocks nearby, oblivious to the tension, and reality crashed over her. She'd brought them into this. By coming to Lloyd's door wearing that ring, by accepting his help, she'd pulled them into his orbit, and his orbit apparently came with enemies who might use 2-year-old girls as leverage. Fine, she said tightly. Security stays. But I want to know what I'm dealing with. No more vague warnings about complications and gray areas. If I'm risking my daughters by being here, I deserve to know exactly what the risk is. Lloyd studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Tomorrow, after the twins are in bed, I'll tell you everything you want to know about who I am and what I do. And then you can decide if you want to stay or if you'd rather I set you up somewhere else with protection but distance. Deal. The next evening, Grace put Eva and Ava to bed early, reading them 3 stories before they finally drifted off. She found Lloyd in his office, 2 glasses of wine already poured. Liquid courage? She asked, taking the offered glass. Honesty is easier with good wine. Lloyd gestured to the chair across from his desk. Where do you want me to start? The beginning. Who you really are. What you really do. Lloyd took a long drink before speaking. My father, Mateo Hernandez, runs the largest drug trafficking operation on the East Coast. He built it on violence and fear, controls everything from distribution to money laundering. When I was 19, I tried to leave. Wanted to be legitimate, build something that didn't require blood and terror. His expression hardened. He nearly killed me for it. Your mother saved my life and helped me see that escaping completely was impossible. So instead, I built an alternative. What kind of alternative? I run a protection organization. We provide security for people who operate in spaces law enforcement can't or won't touch. Immigrants afraid to go to police, business owners being extorted by gangs, women running from dangerous men who have connections that make restraining orders useless. Lloyd leaned forward. Everything I do has one rule. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We don't traffic drugs. We don't exploit the vulnerable. We don't hurt innocents. But we will use force when necessary against those who do. You're a vigilante. I'm a man who provides services police can't. Sometimes that means violence. Always that means operating outside legal channels. He met her eyes steadily. I'm not going to pretend I'm a good man, Grace. I've killed people. I've destroyed businesses. I've ruined lives when those lives belonged to people who preyed on the weak. Your mother knew all of this. She didn't approve, but she understood why I made the choices I did. Grace processed this, sipping wine to buy time. And your father? You said he runs drugs. Are you at war with him? We have an understanding. I don't interfere with his operations. He doesn't interfere with mine. We maintain separate territories and avoid direct conflict. Lloyd's jaw tightened, but there are other organizations. Rivals who would love to find weaknesses in my operation. Someone seeing you and the twins with my security tells them you matter. That makes you potential leverage. So that SUV today could have been the Volkov family testing boundaries, could have been my father's people checking whether I've acquired new vulnerabilities. Could have been nothing. He drained his wineglass. I won't know until they make a move or until my intelligence network identifies who was watching. Either way, the security around you increases until I'm certain of the threat level. Grace stood and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering city. Somewhere down there, dangerous men were making decisions about whether she and her daughters were worth targeting. The surreal horror of it made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. I should leave, she said quietly. Take the twins and go somewhere far away. Montana or Oregon or somewhere you have no presence. Get us both out of your world before someone decides to use us against you. Is that what you want? I want my daughters safe. They're safest with me. Lloyd stood and crossed to her. Grace, I have resources those other organizations don't. Money, personnel, intelligence networks. If you run, you'll be alone and vulnerable. Here, you have walls of protection between them and anyone who might wish you harm. Walls that wouldn't be necessary if I hadn't come here in the first place. Maybe. Or maybe you'd be dead in an alley somewhere, and the twins would be in foster care. His voice was gentle but firm. You came here because you had no other choice. That hasn't changed. The only difference is now you know what accepting my protection really means. Grace turned to face him. They were close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, smell the subtle cologne he wore, feel the warmth radiating from his body. I need time to think about this, to decide if staying is worth the risk. Take whatever time you need. The job offer stands regardless. If you decide to leave, I'll set you up in another city with enough money to start over and security until you're established. Lloyd's expression was unreadable. I'm not holding you hostage, Grace. You're free to go anytime, but I'd rather you stayed. Why? What do I matter to you beyond being Maria Sanchez's daughter? Lloyd was quiet for so long, Grace thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Because you look at me like I'm a person, instead of a weapon, or a monster. Because your daughters smile at me without fear. Because having you here, in my home, makes this place feel less empty than it has in 26 years. He paused. And because every time I see that ring on your finger, I'm reminded that once, someone believed I could be better than my father's son. Your mother gave me that. You could too. The honesty in his words cracked something in Grace's carefully constructed walls. She'd been so focused on accepting his help, on managing her debt to him, that she hadn't considered he might actually want them there for reasons beyond obligation. I'll stay, she heard herself say. For now. We'll see how the job goes, how the twins adjust. But Lloyd, if at any point I think they're in real danger, we're leaving. Protection or no protection. Fair enough. Relief flickered across his features. Thank you for trusting me this far. As Grace returned to her suite, she wondered if trust was the right word for what she felt. Lloyd Hernandez was dangerous, criminal, operating in a world that terrified her. But he was also the man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd cared for her daughters like they mattered, who looked at her with an intensity that made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced. She didn't know if staying was the right choice. But leaving felt impossible, not just because she had nowhere else to go, but because some part of her, the part that recognized kindness beneath the danger, wanted to see where this fragile connection might lead. Tomorrow she'd start work. Tomorrow she'd begin building some semblance of normal life within the protection of Lloyd's world. Tonight, She'd check on her sleeping daughters and remind herself why every risk she took was worth it. For Eva and Ava, she'd walk through fire. Staying with Lloyd Hernandez was just another kind of heat to survive. 3 months. That's how long Grace had been living in Lloyd Hernandez's penthouse, and she still wasn't used to waking up without fear. She stood at the window of her suite, watching dawn paint Manhattan in shades of gold and pink. Eva and Ava were still asleep in their room, their soft breathing audible through the baby monitor on her nightstand. The peace of this moment felt fragile, like something that could shatter if she acknowledged it too directly. The job at Little Minds Preschool had exceeded every expectation. The children adored her, the staff welcomed her warmly, and the director had already hinted at a promotion to lead teacher by summer. Grace arrived each morning with Eva and Ava, worked with 3- and 4-year-olds while her daughters played in the staff child care room, and left each evening feeling fulfilled in ways she'd forgotten were possible. The salary was exactly what Lloyd had promised, enough to cover expenses with some left over for savings. Grace kept meticulous records of everything he'd spent on them. $12,000 for the Arizona settlement, approximately $8,000 for medical care. Another $15,000 conservatively estimated for housing, food, and clothing over 3 months. $35,000. She'd managed to save $2,000 so far. At this rate, she'd be paying him back for approximately 14 years. The math made her want to scream. A soft knock interrupted her calculations. Grace pulled on her robe and opened the door to find Maria holding a tray with coffee and pastries. "Mr. Hernandez asked me to bring you breakfast. He has a meeting this morning but wanted to make sure you ate before work. He doesn't need to do that." Grace took the tray anyway, the smell of fresh coffee too tempting to refuse. "I can make my own breakfast. He likes taking care of people." Maria's expression was knowing, especially people who mattered to him. After Maria left, Grace sat with her coffee and thought about that phrase, people who mattered to him. Lloyd's care had become a constant over the past 3 months. He asked about her day every evening, played with Eva and Ava before their bedtime, left small gifts, books he thought she'd enjoy, toys for the twins that appeared without announcement. Nothing extravagant, but thoughtful in ways that suggested he paid attention to details she didn't realize he noticed. The boundaries between them had blurred gradually. Breakfasts together became routine. Evenings spent watching movies after the twins were asleep felt natural. Conversations stretched late into the night, covering everything from childhood memories to philosophical debates about justice and morality. And there were moments, brief, electric moments, when their eyes would meet, and Grace would feel something shift in the air between them. Lloyd would lean closer, his gaze dropping to her mouth, and her breath would catch. Then one of them would pull back, remembering the impossibility of anything more developing between them. Grace was his charity case, the woman he'd rescued out of obligation to her dead mother. Getting involved romantically would complicate everything, cross lines that shouldn't be crossed, except it didn't feel like obligation anymore. The way Lloyd looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her skin warm that wasn't duty. The way his hand lingered when helping her with her coat. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he'd started asking her opinion on business decisions that had nothing to do with preschool administration. Grace was falling for him. Had been falling for weeks, maybe months. And the terrifying part was she suspected he felt the same. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lloyd. "Need to discuss something important. My office at 8 p.m. after twins are asleep?" Grace's stomach tightened. Important discussions in Lloyd's world could mean anything from security threats to business complications. She typed back, "I'll be there." Work distracted her for most of the day. A 4-year-old named Sophie had a meltdown over sharing blocks, requiring 20 minutes of patient negotiation. 2 parents came in for conferences about their children's progress. Eva got into a minor scuffle with another toddler over a toy, which required Grace to play both mother and teacher. By the time she got home, Grace was exhausted, but grateful for the normalcy. This was the life she'd wanted, working with children, providing for her daughters, building something stable and good. Carlos had driven them home, as he did every day. 2 additional security personnel followed in a separate car, as they had since the incident in Central Park 3 months ago. Grace had stopped noticing them most of the time, the same way she'd stopped flinching at the expensive art on Lloyd's walls, or the casual wealth that surrounded every aspect of his life. "Mama, can we have mac and cheese?" Eva asked as they entered the penthouse. "Ask Maria. She's making dinner tonight." The twins ran off to find Maria, leaving Grace alone in the elevator vestibule. Lloyd emerged from his office, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Spanish. He saw her and held up one finger just a minute. Grace watched him pace, noting the tension in his shoulders. Whatever he was discussing wasn't pleasant, His free hand kept curling into a fist, releasing, curling again. When he finally ended the call, his expression was carved from stone. "Problem?" Grace asked. "Nothing I can't handle." He softened slightly, the hard edges smoothing as he focused on her. "How was your day?" "Good. Exhausting but good." Sophie finally learned to share, which feels like a major victory. "The one you've been working with for weeks?" At her surprised nod, Lloyd smiled. "You talk about your students." "I listen." The casual intimacy of that statement, "I listen," made Grace's heart skip. Before she could respond, Eva and Ava came barreling back, demanding Lloyd's attention. He crouched to their level immediately, letting them tell him about their day in that scattered, enthusiastic way 2-year-olds communicated. Grace watched him with her daughters and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Lloyd was good with them, patient and playful, never condescending. He'd taught Eva to count to 10 in Spanish. He'd helped Ava overcome her fear of the dark by installing a nightlight that projected stars on her ceiling. He remembered which twin liked strawberries and which preferred blueberries. He'd become a fixture in their lives, steady and reliable in ways Grace hadn't known men could be. After dinner, mac and cheese for the twins, pasta primavera for the adults. Grace bathed Eva and Ava and got them into pajamas. Their bedtime routine had become sacred. 2 stories, a song, kisses from Grace and increasingly from Lloyd, who'd started appearing at their door right before lights out. Tonight was no different. Lloyd knocked softly at 7:45, entering with a book Grace recognized as a new addition to his collection. "I thought we could try this one," he said, holding up a Spanish children's book. "If that's okay with you." "It's perfect." Grace settled on the floor with the twins while Lloyd sat in the chair beside their bed. His Spanish was fluid and musical as he read, nothing like the clipped commands she'd heard him use on the phone. Eva and Ava listened with wide eyes, understanding maybe half the words but captivated by his voice. When he finished, they demanded he read it again. "Tomorrow," Lloyd promised. "It's bedtime now." The twins protested but settled when Grace sang their favorite lullaby. Lloyd stood by the door, watching with an expression Grace couldn't quite read. Tender maybe, wistful. Once the twins were asleep, Grace and Lloyd walked downstairs together in comfortable silence. The penthouse felt different at night, softer, more intimate with just the 2 of them and the sleeping children. "You wanted to talk," Grace said as they entered Lloyd's office. "I did. Sit, please." Lloyd moved to the bar cart and poured 2 glasses of wine. "This might require alcohol." Grace's anxiety spiked. "What's wrong? Is someone threatening us? Did something happen with your father, or those Volkov people you mentioned?" "Nothing like that. Everyone's been remarkably quiet lately." Lloyd handed her a glass and settled in the chair beside hers instead of behind his desk. The proximity felt deliberate. "This is about us. About this situation we've created." Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. "What situation?" "You and the twins have been here 3 months. In that time you've become—" Lloyd paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You've become important to me. More than just Maria's daughter. More than just people I'm protecting." "Lloyd, let me finish." He set down his wine glass. "I wake up looking forward to breakfast with you. I schedule my meetings around being home for dinner. I find excuses to check on the twins, because seeing them happy makes me happy. And when I look at you, Grace, I see—" He stopped, jaw working. "I see everything I didn't know I wanted until you fainted on my doorstep." Grace couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only stare at this dangerous, complicated man who was looking at her like she was something precious. "I'm falling in love with you," Lloyd said quietly. "Have been for weeks. Maybe from the beginning, I don't know. But I can't keep pretending this is just me helping you out of obligation. It stopped being that the moment I caught you and saw that ring and knew I'd move heaven and earth to keep you safe." "You can't." The words burst out. "Lloyd, you can't love me. I'm broken. I came here with nothing. I'm still paying off debt that'll take years to clear. I have 2 children who aren't yours and responsibilities you didn't sign up for. I don't care about any of that. You should. You're this powerful man with resources and connections, and you could have anyone. Why would you choose someone like me?" Lloyd stood and pulled Grace to her feet, his hands gentle on her arms. "Because you see me, not Lloyd Hernandez, the criminal or the businessman or the man everyone's afraid of. Just me, the person underneath all the armor." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Because you're strong and smart and you love those little girls with a ferocity that humbles me. Because when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out." Tears burned Grace's eyes. "This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know you sing off key when you think no one's listening. I know you cry during children's movies and laugh at terrible jokes and refuse to give up even when everything's falling apart. Lloyd's voice roughened. I know you're terrified of being a burden but desperate to protect your daughters. I know you keep a notebook of everything I've spent on you, because you're determined to maintain your independence. I know you, Grace. Maybe not everything, but enough to know I want to learn the rest. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you feel anything for me. Anything beyond gratitude or obligation. Because if this is one-sided, I need to know now so I can put distance between us and stop making a fool of myself. Grace looked at him, really looked at him. At the vulnerability in his eyes that he showed to no one else. At the hope and fear warring across his features. At the man who'd given her everything and asked for nothing in return until this moment. I feel everything for you, she whispered. It terrifies me, but I do. I think about you constantly. Wonder what you're doing when you're gone. Look forward to seeing you in ways that have nothing to do with gratitude. When you play with the twins, my heart does this thing where it feels too big for my chest. And when you look at me the way you're looking at me right now, I forget how to breathe. Lloyd's hand slid to frame her face. Then let me do this properly. Let me take you on a real date. Let me court you the way you deserve, instead of just existing in this strange limbo we've created. A date? Grace almost laughed. We live together. We eat together every day. We've seen each other at our worst. Isn't that beyond dating? Then let me try anyway. Let me take you somewhere beautiful and hold your hand without it being an accident. Let me kiss you goodnight at your door like a gentleman instead of lying awake thinking about it. You think about kissing me goodnight? I think about kissing you everywhere. His voice dropped lower, intimate and rough. Your mouth, your neck, that spot behind your ear that makes you shiver when my hand accidentally brushes it. I think about a lot more than kissing, Grace. But I'm trying to be respectful. Heat flooded through her. What if I don't want respectful? Lloyd's eyes darkened. Don't say that unless you mean it. Grace rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. I mean it. He kissed her with a gentleness that quickly transformed into something deeper, more desperate. His mouth moved against hers like he was drowning and she was air. Grace's hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer as 3 months of tension finally broke. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lloyd rested his forehead against hers. We should slow down. Do this right. Why? Because you deserve romance and courtship. Because rushing this feels like taking advantage of your situation. Because... Grace silenced him with another kiss. Lloyd, I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because I owe you or because I'm grateful, but because I want you. Is that clear enough? Very clear. He lifted her into his arms in one smooth motion, carrying her toward the door. But we're still doing the date, tomorrow night. Somewhere expensive where I can show you off. I don't have anything to wear to somewhere expensive. That's what tomorrow afternoon shopping is for. Lloyd's smile was warm and slightly wicked. I'm taking you to the best restaurant in Manhattan, Grace. You'll need a dress that matches. This is insane. We just admitted we have feelings and you're already planning elaborate dates? I've been planning this date for 6 weeks. Just waiting for you to catch up. He carried her to her suite, setting her down gently at her door. The self-control it took for him to step back instead of following her inside was visible in every tense line of his body. Good night, Grace. You could come in. The twins are asleep. We could... Tomorrow. His voice was strained. After our date. After I've done this properly. I've waited 3 months. I can wait 1 more night. Grace watched him walk away and marveled at his restraint. Most men would have taken what she was offering without hesitation. Lloyd Hernandez, criminal and protector, wanted to court her first. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. Lloyd had arranged for Maria to watch Eva and Ava overnight their first sleepover without Grace. The twins were excited about the adventure, too young to understand what it meant that their mother was going on a date. At 2 p.m., a stylist arrived with 6 designer dresses for Grace to try. She settled on a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and made her feel beautiful in ways she'd forgotten were possible. The stylist also brought shoes, a clutch, and jewelry that was probably worth more than Grace's yearly salary. Mr. Hernandez has excellent taste, the stylist said as she helped Grace with her makeup. He described you perfectly. He picked all this? Every detail, down to the shade of lipstick. The woman smiled. You're very lucky. Men like that don't come around often. Grace studied herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Polished, elegant, confident. She looked like someone who belonged in Lloyd's world. At 7 p.m. precisely, Lloyd knocked on her suite door. Grace opened it to find him in a tailored black suit that fit perfectly, his hair styled back, looking devastating. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "I knew you would be, but seeing it is something else entirely. You look pretty good yourself." "I'm terrified." The admission came with a slight smile. "I've negotiated with dangerous men without breaking a sweat, but taking you on a date has me nervous." "Good. I'd hate to be the only one feeling that way." Carlos drove them to a restaurant in Tribeca that Grace had only read about in magazines. The kind of place that required reservations months in advance and had a dress code enforced by subtle but firm staff. Lloyd had reserved a private room overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, candlelight, a table set for two with roses and wine already breathing. "This is too much," Grace said as he held out her chair. "This is exactly right." Lloyd settled across from her. "I'm trying to make up for 3 months of wanting to do this, and not being able to." Dinner was incredible courses that appeared like art, wine that tasted like liquid silk, dessert that made Grace moan with pleasure. They talked the way they had dozens of times before, but something had shifted. Lloyd's hand found hers across the table. His thumb traced circles on her wrist. The air between them felt charged with possibility. "I need to tell you something," Lloyd said as they lingered over coffee. "About why I've been so careful with you. Why I've tried so hard to maintain boundaries. Okay, you came to me vulnerable and desperate. Taking advantage of that developing feelings while you were dependent on me felt wrong. Like I was using your situation to get something I wanted." His expression was serious. "I needed you to be stable first. To have your own income, your own space within my home, options that didn't require my approval. I needed you to choose me from a position of strength, not desperation." Grace's throat tightened. "That's why you've been so distant sometimes. Why you pulled back when things got intense. I wanted you to know that leaving was always an option, that if your feelings were just gratitude or fear of losing security, you could walk away without consequences." Lloyd's grip on her hand tightened. "But Grace, you're stable now. You have a job you're excellent at. You've saved money. You have security that isn't contingent on my protection. If you choose me now, it's because you want to, not because you need to." "I choose you," Grace said without hesitation. "Not because of what you've given me or what you can provide. Because of who you are. Because you caught me when I fell and somehow became the safest place I've ever known." Lloyd stood and moved around the table, pulling Grace to her feet. He kissed her with a reverence that made her eyes burn, his hands cradling her face like she was something infinitely precious. "Take me home," Grace whispered against his mouth. "And don't leave me at my door tonight." The drive back to the penthouse felt endless. Lloyd kept her hand in his, occasionally bringing it to his lips. The anticipation built with every passing block, every red light, every breath. Maria met them in the foyer with a smile. "The twins are sleeping peacefully. They ate all their dinner and asked for you only twice. I'll stay in the guest room on the second floor tonight in case they wake up." "Thank you, Maria." Lloyd's voice was rough with barely controlled desire. The moment they were alone in the elevator, Lloyd pulled Grace against him, kissing her with the intensity he'd been restraining all evening. She responded with equal fervor, her hands sliding under his suit jacket. "Your suite or mine?" he asked between kisses. "Yours. It's farther from the twins' room." Lloyd's bedroom was masculine and elegant, all dark wood and leather. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, curtains open to let in the ambient light. The bed dominated the space, massive and covered in what had to be 1,000 thread-count sheets. "We can still slow down," Lloyd said, even as his hands moved to the zipper of her dress. "If you want to wait." "I don't want to wait." Grace turned to face him. "I want you, all of you. Tonight and tomorrow and however long this lasts. Forever." Lloyd's eyes were intense. "If I have my way, this lasts forever." "That's a long time." "Not long enough." He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each inch of skin as it was revealed. Grace had never felt so cherished, so desired, so completely seen. When she finally stood before him in just her underwear, Lloyd looked at her like she was art. "You're perfect." His voice was rough. "Absolutely perfect." Grace helped him out of his suit, discovering the tattoos she'd only glimpsed before. Ink covered his ribs, his shoulder, abstract designs mixed with words in Spanish she'd have to ask him about later. His body was muscular and scarred in ways that told stories of a violent past. "Are you afraid?" he asked, seeing her trace a particularly vicious scar across his abdomen. "Of you? Never." Grace kissed the scar. "Of how much I feel for you?" "Absolutely terrified." Lloyd lifted her and laid her on the bed, following her down. What happened next was tender and passionate, careful and wild. He paid attention to everything, what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch, what made her cry out his name. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Grace's head on Lloyd's chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know it's fast. I know we have complications to work through, but I need you to know. I love you, Grace. You and those beautiful little girls who've taken over my home and my heart." Grace tilted her head to look at him. "I love you too. It terrifies me, but I do." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because this is too good, too perfect. And in my experience, when things are too good, they fall apart." Lloyd shifted to look at her directly, his expression serious. "I can't promise life will be easy. My world is complicated and sometimes dangerous. But I can promise I will never intentionally hurt you. I will never make you feel less than you are. And I will protect you and Ava with everything I have until my last breath." "That's a heavy promise. It's the only one that matters." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each moment. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them. Grace fell asleep wrapped in Lloyd's arms, feeling safer and more loved than she ever had in her life. She woke to early morning light and the sound of small voices in the hallway. Her eyes flew open. "The twins. They're awake," she whispered, sitting up. Lloyd was already moving, pulling on pants. "Maria will handle them until we're ready." But it was too late. The bedroom door opened, and Ava stood there in their pajamas, staring at their mother in Lloyd's bed with wide, confused eyes. "Mama?" Eva's voice was small. "Why are you sleeping in Lloyd's room?" Grace's mind raced, trying to figure out how to explain this to 2-year-olds. But before she could speak, Lloyd crouched to the twins' level. "Because your mama and I care about each other very much. Like how you love your sister. We wanted to be close to each other." He kept his voice gentle, simple. "Is that okay with you?" Eva considered this seriously. Then she climbed onto the bed and snuggled against Grace. "Okay. But I want pancakes." Ava followed her sister, settling on Grace's other side. "Pancakes and strawberries." Lloyd caught Grace's eye over the twins' heads, his expression a mixture of amusement and tenderness. This wasn't how she'd imagined the morning after going, but somehow it was perfect, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. "Pancakes it is," Lloyd said. "Everyone get dressed. I'll start cooking." As the twins ran off to their room, Grace pulled Lloyd back for a quick kiss. "Thank you for handling that so well. They're going to have questions eventually. We'll figure it out together." He kissed her forehead. "We're a family now, Grace. Might as well start acting like it." Family. The word settled over Grace like a warm blanket. 3 months ago, she'd been alone with 2 babies and no future. Now she had Lloyd, had stability, had love that felt solid and real. As they headed downstairs for pancakes and chaos and the beautiful messiness of their blended life, Grace finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good things could last. Maybe she deserved this happiness. Maybe they all did. The next 2 months passed in a blur of contentment Grace had never known existed. The relationship with Lloyd deepened in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. They fell into rhythms that worked: breakfast as a family before work, evenings playing with the twins before bedtime, nights spent in each other's arms after the children were asleep. Eva and Ava adapted quickly to the change. They'd always loved Lloyd, and having him more present in their lives just meant more stories, more games, more laughter. They started calling him Tio Lloyd, Uncle Lloyd without prompting, the title appearing organically in their vocabulary. "Tio Lloyd, watch me," Eva would shout from the playground. "Tio Lloyd, read story," Ava would demand at bedtime. Grace watched these interactions with a full heart, seeing Lloyd transform from the dangerous man who answered phones in clipped Spanish to someone soft and patient and endlessly giving with her daughters. Work continued to go well. The promotion to lead teacher came through in April, bringing with it a salary increase that let Grace save more aggressively. She was up to $8,000 now, still nowhere near the $35,000 she owed Lloyd, but progress nonetheless. Lloyd never mentioned the debt. Every time Grace tried to discuss repayment terms, he'd deflect or change the subject. Finally, one night in May, she cornered him about it. "We need to talk about the money." Lloyd looked up from the business proposal he was reviewing. "What money?" "The $35,000 you've spent on me and the twins. I've saved $8,000. I want to give it to you and establish a payment plan for the rest." "No, Lloyd." "Grace, I'm not taking your money." He set down his papers. "That money was never a loan. It was help I gave freely, expecting nothing in return. But I can pay you back now, at least partially. It's not right to just accept. Then don't think of it as accepting. Think of it as me investing in our future. Lloyd pulled her onto his lap. That money gave you stability, let you build a foundation. Now you're using your savings to create security for the twins. That's exactly what it should be used for. I hate feeling like I owe you. You don't owe me anything. He kissed her forehead. But if it makes you feel better, use that $8,000 to open college funds for Eva and Ava. Give them the future your mother wanted for you. The suggestion was so thoughtful, so perfectly Lloyd, that Grace's eyes burned. Are you always going to be this frustratingly generous? Absolutely. Get used to it. Grace opened the college funds the next week, splitting her savings between 2 accounts that would grow over the next 16 years. Looking at the paperwork, seeing her daughter's names on official documents with actual money behind them, made her cry in the bank's parking lot. Everything was going so perfectly, too perfectly, which is why Grace should have known it wouldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday in late May. Grace was at work, helping a 4-year-old named Marcus with letter recognition, when the preschool director appeared in her classroom doorway looking pale. Grace, you need to come with me. Now. Her heart stopped. The twins, they're fine. They're in the childcare room. But there are 2 police officers here asking to speak with you. Grace's legs nearly buckled. Police. After 3 months of security and safety, something had happened. Someone had found them. Lloyd's enemies had made a move. But when she entered the director's office, the 2 officers didn't look like they were there about protection or threats. They looked official and serious in ways that made her stomach turn. Grace Sanchez? The older officer asked. Yes? I'm Detective Morrison. This is Detective Chen. We need to ask you some questions about Lloyd Hernandez. The floor tilted. What about him? How long have you known Mr. Hernandez? 5 months. Why? What's this about? The detectives exchanged glances. We're investigating his organization for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. We have reason to believe you may have information relevant to our case. Grace's mouth went dry. I don't know anything about his business. You live in his penthouse. You work at a preschool he owns. Your daughters are cared for by his staff. Detective Morrison pulled out a folder. Miss Sanchez, we know you came to Lloyd Hernandez 5 months ago with nothing. That he's provided housing, employment, financial support. We also know his organization operates in illegal activities that have resulted in at least 3 deaths in the past year. Lloyd hasn't killed anyone. Are you sure about that? Detective Chen leaned forward. Because we have evidence suggesting otherwise, and anyone protecting him or refusing to cooperate with our investigation could be charged as an accessory. Terror flooded through Grace. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But Miss Sanchez, I want you to think carefully about your daughters. Do you really want them growing up around a man who murders people? Who operates a criminal organization? Who could be arrested any day and leave you with nothing again? Lloyd would never. Lloyd Hernandez is his father's son, Detective Morrison said bluntly. Mateo Hernandez is one of the most dangerous criminals on the East Coast. You think Lloyd is different? You think he built his empire on legal activities? Wake up, Miss Sanchez. The man you're living with, the man around your children, is a criminal. And if you don't cooperate, you could go down with him. Grace stood on shaking legs. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. And I need to call Lloyd. We'd prefer you didn't contact him until after we've talked. I'm not under arrest. I can call whoever I want. Grace pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Lloyd answered on the first ring. Grace? What's wrong? Police are here, at the preschool, asking about you, about your organization. They want me to give information about. Her voice broke. Don't say anything. Lloyd's voice went hard and cold. Not a word without a lawyer present. I'm sending someone now. They should be there in 10 minutes. Do not let them pressure you into talking. Lloyd, they said you killed people. That you're being investigated for murder. Grace, listen to me. I will explain everything, but not over the phone. Do you trust me? Did she? Grace looked at the detectives watching her with calculation in their eyes. Looked at her daughters playing innocently in the next room. Thought about 5 months of Lloyd's kindness and protection and love. Yes, she whispered. I trust you. Then wait for the lawyer and don't say anything. I'll be there as soon as I can. The lawyer arrived 12 minutes later, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Moss, who immediately took control of the situation. She spoke to the detectives in clipped, professional tones while Grace sat in stunned silence. My client has no information relevant to your investigation, Catherine said firmly. She's a preschool teacher who lives in Mr. Hernandez's building. She has no involvement in his business operations. She's romantically involved with him, Detective Chen countered. Surely he's discussed his work. Mr. Hernandez runs multiple legitimate businesses, including this preschool. Any discussions Miss Sanchez may have had with him concern legal operations only. Catherine gathered her briefcase. If you have further questions, you can direct them to my office. Miss Sanchez is done speaking with you. The detectives left, but their parting words echoed in Grace's head. Think about those little girls, Miss Sanchez. Think about what kind of man you're protecting. Lloyd arrived 20 minutes later, striding into the preschool with Carlos and 2 other security personnel. He looked furious and worried and barely in control. Are you okay? His hands framed her face, eyes searching hers. Did they threaten you? Touch you? They asked questions. About you, about us, about your business. Grace's voice shook. Lloyd, they said you killed people. That there's evidence. Not here. Lloyd's gaze swept the preschool, noting the staff watching through windows. We'll talk at home. Can you get the twins? The drive back to the penthouse was silent and tense. Eva and Ava sensed something was wrong and stayed quiet in their car seats. Carlos drove while Lloyd held Grace's hand so tightly it almost hurt. Once they were safely inside the penthouse, Lloyd sent the twins with Maria for dinner and movie time. Then he led Grace to his office and closed the door. I'm going to tell you the truth. All of it. And then you're going to decide if you want to stay. Grace sat, her hands trembling in her lap. Did you kill someone? Yes. Lloyd didn't hesitate. 3 people in the 5 years I've been running my organization. All of them were direct threats. One was targeting a woman under my protection. One had information that would have gotten innocent people killed. One was planning to bomb a building with families inside. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't do it casually, but yes, I ended their lives. The room spun. Grace had known Lloyd operated in gray areas, but knowing abstractly and hearing him confirm specific murders were different things. The police said they have evidence, that you're being investigated for racketeering and conspiracy. They've been investigating me for 3 years. They have circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete enough for charges. That's why they came to you. They're hoping you'll provide testimony or information they can use. Lloyd's expression was grim. Grace, I need you to understand something. My organization protects people the law won't. We operate outside legal channels because legal channels fail. But that makes us criminals in the eyes of law enforcement. You should have told me. Grace's voice broke. You should have been honest about the extent of what you do. Would you have stayed if I had? 5 months ago, desperate and terrified, would you have accepted help from a man who admitted to killing people? Grace wanted to say yes, wanted to claim she would have been brave and understanding. But the truth was, she probably would have run. The twins, she whispered. Are they in danger because of this investigation? No. The police have nothing on me regarding the children, and I keep you completely separate from anything illegal. There's no evidence tying you to my organization because you're not involved. But I'm here, living in your home, in a relationship with you. Grace stood, pacing. Those detectives looked at me like I was complicit, like I was choosing to protect a criminal. Aren't you? Lloyd's voice was quiet. You knew I wasn't completely legitimate. You chose to stay anyway. I didn't know you'd killed people. Would it have changed anything if you had? He stepped closer. I'm the same man who caught you when you fell, who took care of your daughters, who loves you enough to give you the choice to leave right now. No consequences, if this is too much. Grace pressed her hands to her face. I don't know what to do. I don't know if staying is protecting my daughters or putting them at risk. I don't know if loving you makes me complicit in things I find morally wrong. I don't know anything anymore. Lloyd pulled her into his arms, and Grace let herself be held even though part of her wanted to push away. He smelled familiar and safe, and that made everything worse because how could a murderer feel safe? Take time, Lloyd said against her hair. Think about what you need. What the twins need. I'll give you space to figure it out. What if I decide to leave? Then I'll set you up somewhere safe with enough money to start over. I'll make sure you and the twins are protected even if you're not with me. His arms tightened. But Grace, I'm hoping you'll stay. I'm hoping you'll see that the man I am with you, the man who plays with your daughters and holds you at night, is real. The violence is real too, but it's not all of me. Grace pulled back to look at him. At the face she'd come to love, the eyes that watched her with desperate hope. He was right, he'd never hidden his darkness from her. She'd just chosen not to look too closely at what operating in gray areas really meant. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to think without you here influencing my decisions." "How much time?" "I don't know. A few days, maybe. A week." Grace stepped out of his embrace. "Can you stay away that long? Let me figure this out without pressure." Pain flickered across Lloyd's features, but he nodded. "I'll stay in the second-floor guest suite. You'll have the penthouse to yourself with the twins. If you need anything, I'm a phone call away." "Thank you." Lloyd gathered some clothes and left without another word. The penthouse felt enormous and empty without him, even with Eva and Ava chattering through dinner. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Grace sat alone in the living room and tried to untangle her feelings. She loved Lloyd, that hadn't changed, but love didn't exist in a vacuum. It came with complications and consequences, and questions about what she could accept. Could she be with someone who killed people, even if those people were threats? Could she raise her daughters around violence disguised as protection? Could she look at herself in the mirror and justify loving a criminal? The questions circled endlessly with no clear answers. 3 days passed. Grace went to work, came home, cared for the twins, and avoided Lloyd except for brief, painful encounters when he came to see Eva and Ava. The twins asked where Tio Lloyd was sleeping and why Mama looked sad. Grace had no good answers. On the 4th day, Detective Morrison showed up at the preschool again. "Have you thought about what we discussed, Miss Sanchez?" Grace looked at the detective and made a decision. "I have. And I'm not cooperating with your investigation. You're making a mistake. Lloyd Hernandez is dangerous. Lloyd Hernandez saved my life and my daughter's lives when we had nothing. He's been nothing but kind and generous and protective. Whatever else he may be, whatever he may have done, he's never hurt us, never made us feel unsafe." Grace's voice was steady. "And I'm not going to help you destroy him for doing things you can't prove he did, even if it means you're protecting a murderer." "Even then." Detective Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I hope you don't regret this choice, Miss Sanchez, for your daughter's sake." After he left, Grace felt simultaneously liberated and terrified. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. That evening she found Lloyd in his office. He looked up when she entered, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I talked to the detective today," Grace said without preamble. "Told him I wouldn't cooperate with his investigation." Lloyd stood slowly. "Grace, I'm not finished." She moved closer. "I don't agree with everything you do. I probably never will. The violence, the gray areas, the moral compromises, they bother me. They'll always bother me. I understand if you want to leave, but I'm not leaving." Grace cut him off. "Because you're right. The man who kills threats isn't all of you. You're also the man who caught me when I fell, who plays tea party with 2-year-olds, who reads bedtime stories in Spanish and makes sure I eat breakfast, who looks at me like I'm precious. You are precious, and you're complicated and dangerous and morally ambiguous. But you're also mine, and I'm choosing to stay, to love you, to build a life with you despite the complications, because life with you, even with all this mess, is better than life without you." Lloyd crossed the space between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "I love you. God, Grace. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good. We should both be a little terrified. Keeps us honest." He kissed her with a desperation that spoke of 4 days apart and the fear of losing her forever. Grace kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring everything she felt into the connection. When they finally broke apart, Lloyd rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you, I will never do anything to put you or the twins at risk. My violence, my business, it stays separate from our family." "Our family," Grace repeated. The word felt right, felt true. "Is that what we are now? If you'll have us? Me and all my complications?" Grace thought about Eva and Ava, asleep upstairs, safe and loved and thriving in ways they never had before. Thought about the life they were building in this beautiful penthouse with this dangerous, tender man. Thought about love that existed in gray areas, complicated and imperfect and absolutely real. "Yeah," she said. "I'll have you, all of you." They went upstairs together, and Grace finally felt like she was home. Not the penthouse or the city or even the safety Lloyd provided. Just him, his arms around her, his heart beating steady against her ear, his voice promising forever. Whatever came next, police investigations or moral quandaries or complications she couldn't predict they'd face together. That was enough. It had to be enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. so you don't miss any upload from us.